Lin Haoran stood in front of the Huading investment building where the high gaze entered the clouds, looking up at the glass curtain wall with cold light, feeling both excited and nervous. Today is the day he reported as his first day of his life. This top investment company is the dream place for countless graduates in the financial system, and the first battle he proved himself. "Hey, newcomer, are you fucking me in a daze? Come in quickly and don't take the lead." A man in a suit pushed him impatiently, his lingering was full of disdain. Lin Haoran hurriedly apologized and hurried into the hall with his head down. In the elevator, several brightly dressed employees were chatting about the latest market trends, and occasionally glanced at Lin Haoran with some contempt. He lowered his head and looked at the slightly cheaper suit on his body and smiled bitterly. He graduated from an ordinary university, and no one had any background. He knew that his real life in this company was the lowest level. When I arrived at the 28th floor, the actual hospitality office area was a small gap, and the air was filled with the smell of printer ink. Lin Haoran just sat down and was stopped by a colleague wearing black-framed glasses. "Hey, newcomer, I'm Shaoli. I'm responsible for taking you. Your work these days is very simple, helping you organize documents, run errands, and deliver information. Also, the coffee machine is in the corridor, and remember to be on standby at any time." Shaoli was so excited that he left a bunch of documents and turned away. Lin Haoran looked at the thick stack of information on the table and sighed. He knew that these broken work had no technical content at all, but since he chose this path, he had to grit his teeth and rush it. He buried his head and started to sort out, and his ears were constantly transmitting other practical private words. "I heard that there's a new batch of new ones that can't afford to buy even a look-like suit. Ha, I guess I'll have to leave in a few days. Not everyone can get through here." These words pierced into Lin Haoran's heart like a pin. He tightened the pen in his hand, and did not express any emotion on his face. He told himself that patience was the first step, and one day he would let these people shut up. On the first day of work, I was so busy that I printed, copied, sent documents, and even asked to buy coffee at a high level. Lin Haoran ran and sweated heavily, but no one said thank you. At 9 o'clock in the evening, the people in the office kept leaving, and he was still working overtime to sort out a bunch of reports. "Hey, I'm new. There is a piece of information in the basement file room. I'll use it tomorrow morning. You can get it." Shaoli left and said the next sentence, but he didn't even explain which piece of information it was. Lin Haoran was slightly lit up and dragged his tired body towards the elevator. The basement file room is cold and damp, and there is a musty smell in the air. He turned on the flashlight and shuttled between rows of file racks. After searching for a long time, he found that there was no information Shaoli said at all. "It's just deliberately messing with me again." Lin Haoran smiled self-deprecatingly, and just as he was about to leave, he kicked something hard under his foot. He looked down and saw a small black U-panel with a slightly worn surface, as if it had been abandoned by someone. "What is this?" He lifted up and looked around. There was no one in the file room. He hesitated for a moment, and still stuffed the U-plate into his pocket. "Anyway, it's not something worth it, maybe it's just someone accidentally dropped it." It was already early in the morning when I returned to the rental house. Lin Haoran was so tired that he fell on the bed without even his clothes. But my brain kept thinking about that U-plate. He got up and inserted into the notebook computer. An encrypted file folder pops up on the screen with the file name Xplan Core Data. Core Data? Is this the company's thing? Lin Haoran's heartbeat was rapid. As a practical student, he knew very well how confidential the project data invested in Huading was. Even if a document leaked out, it could cause an earthquake in the distribution industry. He tried to enter several simple passwords, and all of them showed errors. Just as he was about to give up, a series of prompts popped up on the screen. "Does the backup decryption mode be enabled?" Lin Haoran was stunned for a moment and clicked yes. After the screen flashed for a few times, the file folder actually opened. There were a bunch of data forms and reports. He opened one at a glance and saw several big words: Star Technology Investment Project Risk Evaluation. Xingchen Technology, isn't this a big project the company is following recently? I heard that the investment amount is as high as tens of billions. Lin Haoran murmured, and continued to look down. The report details the financial loopholes and market risks of Xingchen Technology, and even predicted that if the investment continues, the company will face huge losses. Why is this happening? These data clearly show that there is something wrong with the project. Why is the company still pushing it? Lin Haoran raised his eyebrows and his brain moved quickly. Although he was only a real student, he majored in financial analysis at university and was extremely sensitive to data. He quickly realized that this report might be the truth about a high-level intentional invisibility. But the problem is, as a real life, what can he do with such confidential information? If you hand it over, you will be mistaken for business secrets, and the consequences will be unthinkable. But if he doesn't care, the company will feel uneasy because of this project. Stay it for now, it may be useful. Lin Haoran pulled out the U-plate, hid it in the depths of the pole, and stored various ideas in his brain. The next morning, Lin Haoran came to the company with dark circles on his face, and the atmosphere in the office was extremely intense. It turns out that Xingchen Technology's project will hold a key meeting today, and high-level players are all quarreling about whether to invest additionally. Lin Haoran, go to the conference room to help prepare information, hurry up. Shaoli was as proud as ever. Lin Haoran looked down and felt a little different in his heart. He knew that the results of this meeting might determine the life and death of the project. In the conference room, the high-level people were already seated, and the atmosphere was so stressed that it made people breathless. Lin Haoran stood in the corner, responsible for distributing information, and occasionally heard a few sentences to discuss. His straight boss Zhang Min sat next to the main seat, with a cold face, and his eyes were as sharp as if he could see through people's hearts. General Zhang, what do you think? Jing Mingming is currently very happy in Xingchen Technology's project. Why have you been opposing additional investment? A middle-aged man wearing a gray suit spoke with an aggressive language. Zhang Min smiled coldly and knocked on the table. Look. Manager Wang, your report is full of superficial data, and the real risks are hidden cleanly by you. I object because I don't want to let the company pay the most. Manager Wang's face froze and smiled strongly. General Manager Zhang laughed. Our data have been verified by multiple parties. Where are the risks? Lin Haoran stood aside and felt a little moved. The report I saw on the U-disc last night now forms a clear contrast with Manager Wang's statement. He hesitated for a moment, finally plucked up his courage, and said to Zhang Min next to him in a low voice, General Zhang, I have some ideas. Can you say 2 sentences? Zhang Min glanced at him, with a little surprise in her eyes. Who are you? Real life, Lin Haoran. He replied with a stern head, his voice trembling a little. There were a few light smiles in the conference room, and someone muttered in a low voice, a real student dares to interrupt, and he is really not afraid of death. Zhang Min didn't laugh and pointed, say it. Lin Haoran took a deep breath and calmed down. I think there are major financial loopholes in Xingchen Technology's project. According to the data I have seen, their cash flow has been close to breaking and the market competition is also declining. If additional investment continues, the company may face at least 30% risk. Once this word came out, the whole scene was silent. Manager Wang's face suddenly turned blue and slapped the table suddenly. Boy, what are you talking nonsense? Where did you come from when you were a real life? Lin Haoran's heart beat like a drum, but he knew that he could not retreat at this moment. He replied coldly, I can't disclose the source of the data, but I can guarantee its authenticity. If Manager Wang doesn't believe it, the Ministry of Finance can recheck Xingchen Technology's financial report for the past 3 months, especially their payments, and the problem is clear at a glance. Zhang Min's eyes lit up slightly, and she turned to Manager Wang. Manager Wang, check it out. Actually, the words of Xingchen are not unreasonable. Manager Wang was sweating and reluctantly said, Okay. Okay, I will make arrangements. After the meeting ended, Lin Haoran became the focus of everyone's discussion. Those colleagues who had looked down on him were now looking at him with a complex look. Shaoli came over and said with a sour voice, "Oh, Lin Haoran, I didn't expect you to have such skills, so you hit it very deeply." Lin Haoran smiled and did not answer. His eyes swept through the meeting room and noticed a young man in a white shirt looking at him coldly. The man had a sharp look and a disdainful smile appear on the corner of his mouth. It was Ming Chi, an elite employee in the company. "A real student dares to risk the meeting?" Ming Chi walked over and said in a low voice, "Lin Haoran, right? I remember you." Lin Haoran felt nervous, but on the surface he still replied calmly. Brother Ming laughed, "I'm just saying it." Ming Chi snorted coldly, turned away, leaving behind a meaningful back. After the meeting, Zhang Min called Lin Haoran into the office alone. She sat behind the desk, her eyes were still cold, but she had a little appreciation in her language. "Lin Haoran, you have a lot of shame, and you don't even give Manager Wang any face." Lin Haoran lowered his head and replied cautiously, "General Zhang, I just think that if I don't say it, the company may lose money." Zhang Min clicked the head and was silent for a moment before saying, "Your analysis is good, but remember that this is a job, not a class. Before speaking, consider your own weight. I will remember what happened today, but I will not give it an example." "Yes, thank you President Zhang." Lin Haoran relaxed his voice and a fire broke out in his heart when he left the office. He knew that today was just the beginning, and there were more truths waiting for him to dig out in the secrets in that U-disc. At this time, he didn't know that he had been seen as a horn in his eyes, and he didn't know that the small U-wheeler would completely change his fate. Lin Haoran returned to the rental house and it was already deep in the night. There is only a dim yellow light in the small room, and outside the window is the neon light that never fades in the city. He sat at the broken desk, staring at the black U-panel, his heart felt as if it was being pressed by something heavy. The remarks at the meeting today made him feel angry, but they also realized that the things in his hands were far more dangerous than they imagined. The content in the X-Plant core data is definitely not just a project report of Star Technology. He thought that this might be just the tip of the iceberg. He plugged in the U-disc and the encrypted file folder popped out of the screen again. After last night's trial, he had figured out some tricks to decrypt. After clicking on the decryption mode in the preparation, the file folder opened slowly. This time he did not rush to read the information of Star Technology, but turned to a subfile folder called Internal Transaction Record. Internal Transaction? Lin Haoran raised his eyebrows and clicked on it. There were dense forms and capital flow records. The table lists some numbers, such as GI'd and Black Snake, and next to it is a record of huge funds, with a span of 3 years and the amount involved is over 100 million. What is this, money washing? Or insider trading? Lin Haoran's heart beat faster. As a student in the finance department, he knew too well what this recording meant. If these data are true, then the interests behind Huading's investment are beyond his imagination. There may even be high-level operations using the company's platform. He continued to flip down and found that one of the records mentioned a name Manager Wang. It was the Manager Wang, who promoted Star Technology project at today's meeting. The notes read, "The additional investment in the Star project has increased the share of the Eagle Eyes to 15%. Sure enough, there is a problem. Lin Haoran bit his teeth and his brain moved quickly. Manager Wang's recommendation of Xingchen Technology is not for the company's interests, but for personal sharing. If this news is transmitted, not only will Wang finish it, but he will be defeated by bringing the reputation of the entire company. But the problem is, he was in a real life, with such confidential information in his hand, what could he do? Give in to the top? Once he is mistaken, he will be able to get secrets or offend greater power, and he may not be able to save his life. Hide it? But this kind of thing is like a regular blowout and may detonate at any time. No, I have to be calm. Lin Haoran took a deep breath, turned off his computer, and plugged his U-disc into the deepest part of the pen. He knew that the most important thing now is to protect yourself and to find out the information and go to the dragon. Only by standing firmly can he have the opportunity to use this information to change his fate. The next morning, Lin Haoran came to the company with dark circles on his face, and the atmosphere in the office was still strong. The financial verification results of Xingchen Technologies project have not yet been released, but Manager Wang's face is obviously not very good-looking, and he always looks coldly at Lin Haoran. Lin Haoran, go to the finance department to get the latest report and make quick action. Shaoli tried to swear at him as usual, but there was a bit of unwillingness in his language. Obviously, what happened at the meeting yesterday made Shaoli feel a little jealous of him. Lin Haoran pointed at the head and heard a few colleagues talking about private words while passing by the tea. I didn't expect to hear that yesterday's true child made Manager Wang half-deaf at the meeting. The slut is really big, but if you offend someone, you probably won't have any good results. Look at Ming Qi, you've already started to tell him. Lin Haoran's heart sank. Sure enough, when he walked to the door of the financial department, he saw Ming Qi leaning against the door, holding a cup of coffee in his hand, looking at him with a smile. Oh, Lin Haoran, did you have the risk yesterday? Ming Qi was frivolous, but his eyes were full of enemies. If you are a real person, you dare to point fingers at the meeting. You are really not afraid of death. Lin Haoran lowered his head and replied cautiously, Brother Ming, I just said the truth, it's nothing else. Real? Ming Yi sneered, approaching a little, and said in a low voice, Boy, I don't care whether you are lucky or really capable, but this company is not a place for you to go wild. From today on, you'd better be careful not to let me catch the handle. Lin Haoran felt nervous, but he was still calm on his face. Thank you, Brother Ming, for reminding me, I will pay attention. Ming Hu hummed and walked away with the coffee, leaving behind a meaningful back. Lin Haoran knew that this person would never be good at silence, and he would definitely be troubled to come to the door next. Sure enough, that afternoon, Lin Haoran was assigned a new task to help organize investment project information called Blue Hai Fund. This project is one of the company's recent main projects, involving huge funds, and the person responsible is Ming. Lin Haoran, this information is very important. If you have to hand it over to the customer tomorrow morning, the data must be accurate and accurate. If something goes wrong, you know the consequences. Ming Qi threw a bunch of documents on his desk, his language was full of warnings. Lin Haoran looked through and saw that the data were filled with complicated financial reports and market analysis. The data was so large that a normal person could not finish it in 3 days. He knew in his heart that it was obvious that it was Ming Yi deliberately tricky, trying to make him make a mistake, and then he let his face beside the customers and the high level. Brother Ming, I'm afraid I'm alone. Lin Haoran tried to speak. I'm afraid something? Ming Qi stopped him and said with a sneer. Aren't you very capable? Didn't you say it at the meeting yesterday? You can't handle such a small matter. Do you still want to stay in the company? Just watch it yourself. After saying that, Ming Qi turned away, leaving Lin Haoran to face the pile of documents alone. The colleagues next to them talked about private words, some were lucky to be happy, and some were angry, but no one dared to help. Lin Haoran bit his teeth tightly, returned to his seat and started tidying up. He knew that this was the first trap set in the open. If the task was not completed, don't say that it would be promoted and even the actual period would not be over. Time passed minute by minute, and the people in the office kept getting off work, and he was the only one left in the huge space, with draft papers and computers piled on the table. 2 o'clock in the morning, he finally sorted out a first draft, but he always felt that there was nothing wrong with him. These data seemed to be a problem. Lin Haoran raised his eyebrows. There were several abnormal capital flows in the Blue Sea Funds report, which were similar to the internal transaction record he saw on the U-Disk last night. He was moved in his heart and quickly opened the notebook, inserted the U-plate, and found the relevant records. Sure enough, part of the fund flow of Blue Sea Fund coincides with the black snake typography mentioned in U-Disk, and there are even several account transfer time that are exactly consistent. Lin Haoran's brain buzzed and realized that this might be another in-person trading project. Ming Kai asked him to sort out the information, saying that he might want to make him a scapegoat, and once something happens to the project, all the responsibility will be pushed to him. This guy is so heartless. Lin Haoran gritted his teeth, but immediately calmed down. He knew that now was not a time of vitality, but a way to resolve the crisis. He revised the data all night long and obscurely dealt with the abnormal data in the Blue Sea Fund report. There was no problem on the surface, but he left a few small traces for future verification. At the same time, he made a backup of the relevant internal transaction records in the U-disk and stored it in his own cloud disk in case of one thing. The next morning, Lin Haoran handed the information to Minghua with dark circles on his face. The other party took the document and looked through several pages. His face changed slightly. It was obvious that he could really complete it on time. Okay, there's nothing big wrong. Ming Yi's words are not bad, but there is a hint of reluctance in his eyes. However, this is just the first step. You have to participate in the meetings at the customer. Don't think that if you pass this, you will be fine. Lin Haoran responded slightly and felt a sigh of relief in his heart. He knew that although Ming Yi's tricks were resolved this time, the other party would definitely not rest. The confidential information in the U-disk became his only trump card. The afternoon customer meeting was held in the meeting room on the top of the company. Lin Haoran, as an assistant, followed Ming Xiao, was responsible for recording and distributing information. The client is one of the main investors of Blue Sea Fund, a well-dressed middle-aged man with a strong aura and an unquestionable majesty in his words. Mr. Ming, I have read your report. The data is very beautiful, but I want to hear a specific execution plan. The customer spoke, carrying a trial in his language. Ming Wei smiled and talked freely, making the prospects of Blue Sea Fund shatter. Lin Haoran stood aside, listening to the annoying remarks and sneered in his heart. He knew that how much moisture there was in these words depends entirely on the data in the U-disk to see the truth clearly. Halfway through the meeting, the customer suddenly turned to look at Lin Haoran. Who are you? Why are you standing by the side? Ming Qi hurriedly explained, he is the real student of our team and is responsible for help today. Real student, the customer raised his eyebrows and asked casually, what do you think of this project? Lin Haoran felt nervous and did not expect to be named. He glanced at Ming Kai and saw a happy smile on the corner of the other person's mouth, obviously trying to see him feel sad. Mr. Customer, I am just a practical student and have insufficient experience, but if you want to express your opinion. Lin Haoran took a deep breath and plucked up his courage. I think the market prospects of Blue Sea Fund are indeed good, but the allocation of funds may need to be more cautious, especially the investment ratio for small and medium-sized enterprises can be appropriately reduced to avoid potential risks. As soon as this was released, the customer's eyes lit up slightly and he said, it's a bit interesting, young man, your analysis is quite practical. Ming Xia's face froze and she smiled strongly, Mr. Customer, he just said casually that the specific plan will be decided by our team. After the meeting, the customer shook hands with Lin Haoran, praising him for his clear thinking. Ming Wei's face was hard to see. After returning to the office, he sneered and said, Lin Haoran, you are so scared. You dare to look at the faces of customers. You are really capable. Lin Haoran lowered his head and replied calmly, Brother Ming, I just said that if there is something to offend, I apologize. Ming Qi snorted coldly, saying nothing, but the evil in his eyes became even more intense. Lin Haoran knew that although he won a game this time, he offended Ming Qi to death. That afternoon, Zhang Min called Lin Haoran into the office. She sat by the window, the sun shining on her cold face, and her eyes were filled with some reviews. Lin Haoran, I heard about the customer meeting today. Your performance is good. Zhang Min spoke, his language was dull, but you have to understand that the job field cannot be stable by just one or two risks. Ming Ji has already started to tell you. Are you ready to be right? Lin Haoran was stunned for a moment, but he didn't expect Zhang Min to be so straightforward. He pointed and said in a low voice, Thank you, President Zhang, for reminding me that I will be careful. Zhang Min was silent for a moment and suddenly said, Next week, the company has a new project called the Sky Plan, which involves the expansion of overseas markets and is of great scale. I plan to let you participate in it and be responsible for part of the basic data analysis. What do you think? Lin Haoran was shocked. He didn't expect Zhang Min to give him such a great opportunity. He hurriedly replied, I am willing to try it, thanks President Zhang for your trust. Don't thank it too early. Zhang Min smiled coldly. This project is not simple, the water inside is very deep. Can you hold it down? It depends on yourself. Also, remember that on the job site, the team is more important than ability. Do you understand what I mean? Lin Haoran felt a little nervous and said, I understand. When he left the office, he felt mixed emotions. Although Zhang Min's attitude is indifferent, it clearly shows that he is helping him, and even implicitly means pulling. The new project of Skyplan may be another opportunity to bring him closer to the core of the company and closer to the secret truths in the UDisc. In the next few days, Lin Haoran began to participate in the preliminary preparations of the Skyplan and was responsible for data collection and preliminary analysis. Although the workload was amazing, he was very serious and could come up with some unique insights from time to time, and gradually won the approval of several colleagues in the team. Haoran, I didn't expect that you are a practical student and have such strong analytical skills, which are more reliable than some veterans. A colleague named Xiao Zhou patted his shoulder, his language full of appreciation. That's right, yesterday you pointed out the loopholes in the market data, which helped us save us a lot of trouble. Another colleague also echoed. Lin Haoran smiled and said in a deliberate way, I just looked at the data a little more and it was just good at it. But he knew in his heart that most of these economy came from confidential information in the UDisc. Those internal records and transaction data gave him a deeper understanding of the company's operational model and potential risks, and he always grasped the key points when analyzing. However, as he improved his position in the company, he began to feel an invisible pressure. Every time he opens the U-plate, he feels like he is playing with fire, and he may be burned to pieces at any time. What made him even more uneasy was that in the past few days, he always felt that someone was secretly observing him. Once when he worked overtime until late at night, when he left the company, he knew that there was a sound of footsteps behind him. Looking back, there was no one in the air, only the shadow of the road light pulled the boss. He felt nervous and quickly returned to the rental house, hiding the UDisc in a more secret place at night. Does anyone know about U-District? Lin Haoran lay on the bed, turning to the opposite side. He recalled the scene when he was picking up the U-board in the file room that day, and always felt unfavorable. How could such an important thing be abandoned? Will there be greater force behind it to control it? At this time, in a brightly lit office on the roof of Huading Investment Building, a man in a black suit was whispering to the phone, "What's the whereabouts of that U-panel? How did you find out?" A low voice came from the phone, "I haven't found it yet, but someone saw a real person coming out of the file room on the day of his life, and his behavior was somewhat suspicious." Real life, the man sneered, "No matter who he is, don't blame me for not touching something he shouldn't touch. Keep staring, I want to know what exactly is in his hand." The night was getting deeper and deeper, and Lin Haoran didn't know that he had been locked by a pair of invisible eyes. And that small U-panel is bound to set off a bigger storm. Lin Haoran sat in front of the old book desk in the rental house, and the dim yellow light reflected his slightly haggard face. Outside the window, the neon lights of the city are still flashing, and the noise and loneliness are intertwined to form an invisible network, wrapping him tightly. He held the black U-panel in his hand, his eyes were complicated, and his heart seemed to be torn by two forces. One side is the desire for the truth, the other side is the fear of unknown risks. Over the past few days, he performed well in the Skyplan project, and the several data analytical suggestions he proposed were even directly taken by the team, allowing him to escape from his actual life. Even Zhang Min looked at him a few more times, and occasionally chatted with him alone after the meeting. But at the same time, Lin Haoran could clearly feel that the atmosphere around him became strange. In the office, colleagues' private words became more common, and some people looked at him with a simple and slight slander, but with an indecipherable meaning. What made him even more uneasy was that the feeling of being secretly watched became stronger and stronger. On his way home from overtime last night, he heard the sound of sloppy steps coming from behind him again, but when he looked back, there was only a blank street. His heart tightened, and his hand holding the U-plate tightened unconsciously. Can't drag it anymore, I have to figure out what is hidden in this thing. Lin Haoran gritted his teeth, plugged in the U-wheel drive, and opened the computer. A familiar encrypted file folder popped up on the screen. He skillfully clicked on the decryption mode to enter the pile of confidential data. This time, he did not look through the information about the internal transaction records or star technology that he had read before, but instead noticed a sub-file folder called Dark Network Alliance. The file name itself was filled with a dangerous atmosphere. He hesitated for a moment, and still clicked in. In the folder was encrypted communication records and financial transfers, and the amount involved was so large that he was stunned. What shocked him even more was that the high-level names of Huating Investment mentioned on the record many times, including a person with the agency Black Ghost, who was suspected to be a director of the company. These capital flows point to an underground organization he has never heard of, and the projects involved include not only introductory transactions, but also traces of money laundering and illegal financing. This is the dark side of the industry. Lin Haoran murmured, his fingers trembling slightly. He finally understood why this U-disk was abandoned in the file room at Will. This was not a mistake at all, but a trap set up by someone deliberately, waiting for some unlucky guy to come and then become a scapegoat. He was afraid that if he hadn't been careful, he might have been dragged into this storm long ago and would not have been able to save his life. But at the same time, a rage of anger arose from the bottom of my heart. These high-level companies use private pockets in the company's platform and even sacrifice the interests of countless small shareholders. He can't see the truth like this. At this moment, the phone suddenly vibrated, and a text message from a strange number was displayed on the screen. Lin Haoran, something is in your hands, right? Hand it over, otherwise the consequences will be borne by yourself. Lin Haoran's heart beat sharply and his phone almost slid from his hand. He quickly turned off his computer, unplugged his U-disk, and hid it in the depths of the drawer. It was dark outside the window. He walked to the window and pulled the window, and his mind was filled with various guesses. Who is the other party? How did you know that the U-disk is in his hands? Is it hard to tell anyone in the company that has been monitoring him? The next morning, Lin Haoran came to the company with dark circles on his face, and the atmosphere in the office was more depressing than before. He sat down and was called by Shaoli. Lin Haoran, President Zhang is looking for you, go to her office right away. Shaoli's temperament was a little unnatural, and there was a strange look in his eyes. Lin Haoran was a little nervous, and he felt a little nervous. What would happen if Zhang Min came to him? Is it the progress of the Sky Plan, or related to U-disk? When the office door was opened, Zhang Min sat behind the desk, her face still as cold as ever. She raised her head and gestured to him to sit down, then spoke directly, Lin Haoran, your performance has been good recently. The data analysis of the Sky Plan has saved the project group a lot of trouble. But I heard that you seem to have fallen into something that shouldn't be touched. Lin Haoran felt nervous, and on the surface he put on a decisive note, General Zhang, what are you referring to? I don't quite understand. Zhang Min sneered and leaned on the back of the chair, her eyes so sharp that it seemed to see through people's hearts. Don't put it in, I know you have something in your hand. Although the monitoring in the file room that night did not take a picture, someone saw you coming out from there and holding something in your hand. Let's say, what exactly is it? Lin Haoran's heart beat faster and his brain moved rapidly. He knew that since Zhang Min had reached this point, he showed that she had at least some traces. If you expose your responsibilities, you will only make yourself more passive. So he took a deep breath and said in a low voice, General Zhang, I have indeed picked up a U-wheel drive with some company information. But I didn't tell anyone, nor did I plan to do anything with it. I just don't know what to do. After hearing this, Zhang Min was silent for a moment, then stood up, walked to the window, and said to him, Lin Haoran, do you know? This company is very deep, and there are some things that you really touched by, and you will only burn yourself to death. I don't care how you got it, but I'll give you it. It's better to hand it over, otherwise, the consequences are not something you can bear. Lin Haoran lowered his head, hesitated for a moment, and finally gritted his teeth and said, "General Zhang, I understand what you mean. But if I hand it over, will anyone make a fuss about it and will harm the company instead? The things in the U-Disc involve some high-level shady stories. I am afraid that if I miss someone, it will cause greater trouble." Zhang Min turned around, and there was an accident in her eyes. She sat down again, stared at Lin Haoran, and her temperament was slightly calmer. "You are more intelligent than I thought. In this way, I guarantee that you won't let your back on the U-plate. But for exchange, you have to tell me what's there." Lin Haoran waited in his heart. Although Zhang Min was cold, his help to him over the past few days was a practical measure. Compared to other high levels, she at least showed some justice. He pointed and said in a low voice, "Okay, I believe you. There are internal transaction records in the U-Disc, and some numbers pointing to the company's high level and a group called the Dark Network Alliance, involving money laundering and illegal financing." After Zhang Min finished listening, her face changed slightly, but it quickly returned to calm. She pointed and said, "I understand. Take the U-Disc and hand it over to me tomorrow morning. Also, you won't mention this to anyone, including your colleagues. Do you understand?" "Yes, thank you, President Zhang." Lin Haoran pointed at him and felt uncomfortable when he quit the office. He knew that handing the U-Disc to Zhang Min was able to take it off at a time, but it also meant that he finally entered this power struggle. How would Zhang Min handle this information? Did she really help him, or did she have another purpose? At the same time, in the office on another level of the company, Minghu was sitting on the sofa, holding his cell phone in his hand, his face dark. He sat opposite him, a man in black clothes. His air was cold and his eyes were filled with danger. "Mr. Ming, the matter has been found out, and that U-Disc is indeed in Lin Haoran's hands," the man in black said in a low voice, with a hint of impatient attitude in his language. "This kid is in too much trouble recently, and customers and high-level customers have begun to pay attention to him. If you don't solve it as quickly as possible, you should know the consequences." Ming Chi sneered and put his cell phone on the table. "A real life dares to fight me? I don't care whether he is good at being healthy or really capable, he must get the U-wheel drive. If that thing falls into someone else's hands, you and I will be done." The man in black pointed his head and said coldly, "Don't worry, I have arranged someone and I will take action tonight. But if I fail, the responsibility will not be with me. Also, the price must be doubled, and this is a nuisance." Ming Chi gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, as long as Lin Haoran can be solved, money is not a problem. But remember, don't leave any traces, I don't want this to touch me." It was getting deeper and Lin Haoran worked overtime until 9 o'clock before leaving the company. He walked on the empty street, still thinking about the U-board in his brain. Suddenly, a hurrying sound came from behind him. He felt a tight heart in his heart and suddenly turned around. He saw two men in black coats approaching him. "You are Lin Haoran, right? Hand over the things, otherwise don't blame us for being rude," one of the men said softly, holding a stick in his hand, with a ruthless look on his face. Lin Haoran's heartbeat accelerated and he replied calmly, "Who are you? There is nothing worthwhile on me. Are you looking for someone wrong? Stop talking." Another man snorted coldly, stepped forward suddenly, grabbed Lin Haoran's clothes. "Where's the U-plate? If you don't say it, don't blame us for taking action." Lin Haoran's brain was moving at a rapid speed, knowing that the fight would definitely not work. He pretended to be scared and said in a low voice, "Okay. Okay, I'll hand it over, but the thing is not on me. It's in the rental house, you go with me to get it." The two men glanced at each other and said, "Take the way, hurry up, don't play with flowers." Lin Haoran appeared to be smooth, but his brain was just calculating the countermeasures. He deliberately carried two people on the road and walked to a commercial street with a large crowd. Taking advantage of the gap of a green light at an intersection, he suddenly shouted, "Help! Someone is robbing!" Passers-by were fighting on the side, and when two men saw each other, their faces changed, they lowered their voices and turned around and ran away. Lin Haoran took advantage of the opportunity to get into the crowd and hid in a 24-hour convenience store, his heart beating like a drumbeat. Who sent these people? Ming? Or other high-level? Lin Haoran leaned against the shelves, sweating all over. He knew that tonight was just the beginning. Since the other party dared to take action clearly, it would be better to show that the importance of the U-disc was beyond his imagination. The next morning, Lin Haoran brought the U-board to the company and went straight to Zhang Min's office. He told Zhang Min everything about last night and handed over the U-plate. Zhang Min took the U-disc and his face was heavy. It seems that some people are more anxious than I thought. If you do the right thing, I will first hand over the things to me, and I will deal with the next thing. But you have to answer me. No matter what happens, you don't want to intervene again, do you know? Lin Haoran pointed and said calmly, I understand, thank you President Zhang. However, Zhang Min did not act exactly as Lin Haoran expected. She held the U-disc and contacted a veteran of her board of directors to discuss how to use this information to attack opponents. At the same time, she also arranged for Lin Haoran to attend a board meeting that was about to arrive, and spoke as a representative of the data analysis of the Sky Plan. Lin Haoran, this is your chance, but it is also a fire pit. Zhang Min warned him the day before the meeting. At the board, someone will borrow an opportunity to suppress you, and may even shake out the U-board. You have to prepare mentally and be careful when speaking, but don't be afraid. I will help you at the critical moment. Lin Haoran's heart sank, but he knew that this was an opportunity to turn over. If he can stand firmly at the board meeting, he can truly enter the company's core circle and borrow the opportunity to counterattack Ming. On the day of the board meeting, the meeting room of Huading Investment was filled with high-level and shareholders, and the atmosphere was so hushing that it made people breathless. As a real life, being able to stand here is a miracle. He was wearing a borrowed expensive suit and holding a prepared data report in his hand, and was both tight and looking forward to it. After the meeting began, Zhang Min took the lead in introducing the progress of the Sky Plan and specifically mentioned Lin Haoran's contribution. Several directors agreed, but some people also had bad eyes and were obviously dissatisfied with a real risk. When Lin Haoran made a speech, he took a deep breath and began to state with a steady speech, Dear directors, the market potential of the Sky Plan is huge, but according to my data analysis, the competition risks in overseas markets need to be further controlled. I suggest that in terms of fund allocation, choose a stable market first, and conduct a more stringent review of the financial conditions of the partners. His statements were reasonable, and he won the title of several directors. However, just as he was about to finish his preparation, Ming Chi suddenly stood up and sneered and said, Lin Haoran, your analysis is just right, but I want to ask, if you were in reality, where is the basis for the company's decision? Or, do you have any unknown data in your hand that makes you so confident? Once this word came out, the whole scene was silent. The eyes of several directors instantly focused on Lin Haoran, and the atmosphere turned into a strife. Lin Haoran felt nervous, knowing that Ming Chi was forcing him to reveal his flaws, and he might have even guessed what happened to the U-disc. He replied calmly, Mr. Ming, my analysis is based entirely on public data and market reports, without any inappropriate sources. If you have any questions, you can check my data at any time. Ming Chi snorted coldly and continued to ask, Is that right? Then I heard that someone saw you take something you shouldn't take in the file room. Is it true? Lin Haoran was about to respond, but Zhang Min suddenly spoke. His words were cold. Ming, the board of directors is a place to discuss the company's development, not a place to go wild. Lin Haoran's analysis is reasonable. If you have evidence, take it out, don't make any guesses here without a certificate. Ming's face stiffened, but he didn't expect that Zhang Min would protect Lin Haoran so directly. He gritted his teeth and sat down, but the hatred in his eyes became even more intense. The meeting continued, and Lin Haoran successfully resolved the crisis, but he knew in his heart that this was just a calmness before the storm. Sure enough, after the meeting ended, Zhang Min called him aside and said in a low voice, I just received the news that Ming has contacted external forces and is ready to attack you tonight. I have made a backup on U-disc, and the information inside is enough to make Ming and his backer doom. You follow me tonight, and we go to the core members of the board, and directly disclose some of the truth and pull Ming off the horse. Lin Haoran was stunned for a moment, but he didn't expect Jiang Min to be so destined. He pointed his head and said, "Okay, I'll hear you." That night, under Jiang Min's arrangement, Lin Haoran and she came to a director's private club with her. They took out some of the information in the U-Disk, including the certificates linked to the secret network alliance, and submitted it directly to several core directors. Although these data are just the tip of the iceberg, they are enough to put Ming Hu's backer in danger. Ming Hua has been relying on his backing for the past few years and is doing whatever he wants in the company. Now he finally kicked the iron board. A director sneered, "Jiang Min, you handled this matter beautifully. I will call an emergency meeting tomorrow to suspend Ming Chang for investigation." However, just as Lin Haoran and Jiang Min were about to leave, a sudden burst of footsteps came from outside the club. Several men in black came in, holding weapons in their hands and heading straight for Lin Haoran. "Steal the U-plate, otherwise you don't want to leave either." The man in black in the head growled, ruthless. Lin Haoran's heart beat faster, but he didn't expect that the other party would chase him here. Jiang Min reacted very quickly pulled him to hide aside, and shouted, "Security! Call the security guard!" In a mess, Lin Haoran held the U-plate in his pocket tightly and his brain moved quickly. He knew that these people were definitely not something that could be afforded, and there must be greater strength behind them. He gritted his teeth and took advantage of the gap where the man in black was trapped by the security guard and said to Jiang Min in a low voice, "General Jiang, the U-wheel cannot fall in their hands. I'll leave first, you can cover me." Jiang Min clicked her head, her eyes fixed, "Go quickly, don't turn around, I'll deal with it." Lin Haoran took advantage of the trouble and slipped out from behind and ran into the night, his heart beating as if it was about to explode. He knew that although he escaped at a short time, a greater crisis was approaching. That U-plate is no longer his trump card, but a tweak that pushes him to the deep and clear direction. At this time, a man in black lifted a fallen paper on the ground, with several keywords written on it: Black Eagle, Dark Network Alliance, Core Data. He sneered, whispered a phone call, and said in a low voice, "Boss, I haven't got the stuff, but we've confirmed it. Lin Haoran knows too much. What should I do next?" At the end of the phone, a low voice suddenly sounded, "A real life dares to harm me? Tell Ming, this matter is not finished. Also, no matter what, Lin Haoran. It is also a pity to keep it." The night was getting deeper and deeper, and Lin Haoran hid in a remote corner, gasping heavily and sweating. He knew that he had been targeted by greater efforts, and every step he would have had to do with life and death. Lin Haoran hid in the shadows on the corner of the street, gasping for a clear sound in the quiet night. His hands were tightly clutching the U-plate in his pocket, his heart beating as if he was about to break through his chest. Just as the surprise scene at the club was still in sight, the fierce eyes of the men in black and Jiang Min's desperation made him understand that this storm could not be avoided. He knew that he could no longer bear it and must find a stronger support, otherwise he might not only be able to save his U-wheel drive, but his life might be lost. The phone suddenly vibrated. Lin Haoran looked down and saw a text message from Jiang Min. "I'm waiting for you in the company, come quickly, bring something, let's have a last try." Lin Haoran gritted his teeth, quickly pulled down the taxi and headed straight to the Huading investment building. The neon lights outside the car window flashed past, and the speed plate in his brain counted every step ahead. He knew that since Jiang Min had asked him to go back, he must have had a plan, and this attempt was probably the last battle to decide his fate. When I arrived at the company building, it was late at night, and there was no one in the huge office area, only the lights on the top Jiang Min's office were still on. When Lin Haoran pushed the door in, Jiang Min was standing in front of the window, facing him with his back, holding a cup of coffee in his hand, with a cold expression like a statue. "Come?" Jiang Min turned around, glanced over him with a sharp look, and immediately pointed to the notebook computer on the table. "Has the U-Disk been brought? We don't have much time, so we start directly." Lin Haoran pointed his head, took out the U-Disk from his pocket, and inserted it into the computer. A familiar encrypted file folder popped up on the screen. He skillfully clicked on the decryption mode to use the backup, and all the confidential data were expanded. Jiang Min came over and glanced at the data quickly, and her face became more and more solemn. "Sure enough, it's deeper than I thought," Jiang Min said in a low voice, with a burst of anger in her lingering voice. "Behind the Dark Network Alliance, it actually points directly to the Blackhorn faction, one of the founders of the company. They have used Huading investment as a guise for the past few years to manipulate industry resources, wash money, insider trading, and even interfere with market rules, which is simply a cancer in the financial world." Lin Haoran was shocked. Although he had long guessed that the information on the U-Disc was very extensive, he still felt chill when he heard the words company founder. He asked in a low voice, "General Zhang, is this Blackhorn faction, the few veterans in the board of directors?" Jiang Min sneered and said, "It's okay. Chen Tiange, one of the founders, is the leader. He has been behind the scenes for many years, but he has always been the real owner of the company. It is obvious that he is one of his pawns, and more people are selling his life for him. The information in the U-Disc is enough to uproot them, but the problem is that we have to find a safe venue to open it up, otherwise once the certificate is exposed, we will not live the next day." Lin Haoran felt nervous and asked, "Then what plan do you have?" Jiang Min turned around, took out a document from the drawer, and put it on the table. 3 days later, the industry summit will be held at the International Exhibition Center in the city center, and all the bigwigs in the financial industry will be present, including Chen Tiange and his faction. The summit will be broadcast live on the media and representatives of the Government Supervision Department. This is the only opportunity for us to publicly prove it. As long as the information is exposed, Chen Tiange has the ability to do so, he will not be able to make a living." Lin Haoran looked at the document, which was covered with detailed arrangements and invitation letters for the summit. He pointed his head and said, "Okay, I'll hear you. But how can we ensure the safety of the U-Disc in these 3 days? Those men in black may come back any time." Jiang Min smiled coldly and said, "You don't have to worry about this. I have contacted an old friend who is a high-level supervisor. Although he cannot directly intervene, he can provide protection. During these 3 days, you will act with me and I will keep the U-Wheel. At the same time, we have to make multiple backups of the data to prevent it." Lin Haoran hesitated for a moment and still handed over the U-plate. He knew that although Jiang Min was cold, his help was practical throughout the journey. At this point, he had no choice but to trust her. In the next 3 days, Lin Haoran almost didn't meet his eyes. He hid in a safe house with Jiang Min, sorted out the information in the U-Disc overnight, and packaged all the certificates involving the Dark Network Alliance and Black Eagle faction and made them into an unforgettable report. At the same time, Jiang Min used his network to send some key data to several trusted media personnel in advance as a backup plan. "Lin Haoran, remember, on the day of the summit, you were responsible for Chen Tiange and his faction. I'll deal with Chen Tiange and his faction." Jiang Min slapped him the last night, with a rare gentleness in his eyes. "You have done too much, and you'll hand me the rest. But if things get out of control, you'll evacuate the first time. Don't worry about me, do you understand?" Lin Haoran felt warm in his heart and said, "General Zhang, thank you for helping me all the way. But I won't leave. I'm opening this matter, I have to watch it end." Jiang Min didn't say anything else, just patted him on the shoulder and turned around and continued to be busy. On the day of the summit, the International Exhibition Center was filled with people. The top figures in the financial industry gathered here, and the media's video machines and flashlights almost shone on the scene. Lin Haoran was wearing a well-designed suit and followed Jiang Min. It looked calm on the surface, but his palms were covered in sweat. He knew that every word and every action today might determine his fate. The meeting was held step by step. Several industry tycoons came to the stage to speak. The atmosphere seemed harmonious, but Lin Haoran could feel an invisible tension in the air. Chen Tiange sat in the front row, wearing a dark suit, with a fierce smile on his face. Occasionally, he talked with the people beside him in a low voice, and there was no difference at all. "This old fox is so hidden." Lin Haoran secretly felt in his heart and tightened the report information in his hand. Finally, he went to Zhang Min to speak on the stage. As a high-level investment in Huading, she introduced this year's development strategy on behalf of the company. Her language was calm and her content was unscathed, but when she talked about industry regulations and corporate responsibility, the language suddenly changed. Dear colleagues, the prosperity of the financial industry cannot leave the integrity of every company. Unfortunately, some people regard this industry as a private bank, using their power to conduct in-person trading, money washing, and even manipulate market rules. Zhang Min's voice was cold, and her eyes pointed directly at Chen Tianzhu in the front row. Today, on behalf of Huading Investment, I will expose to everyone a dark story that has been hidden for many years, the illegal operation of the Dark Network Alliance and the real operator behind it. As soon as this word came out, the whole scene was silent. The media's camera instantly responds to Zhang Min, and the flashlights come one after another. Chen Tiange's face changed slightly, but soon returned to calm, and there was even a sneer on the corner of his mouth, as if he had expected this scene to happen. Lin Haoran's heart beat faster, but he remained calm and walked onto the stage, holding a thick piece of information in his hand. He took a deep breath and began to chant, "Everyone, I am Lin Haoran, a real student of Huading Investment. Today, I will show you a detailed data report, involving the illegal capital flow records of the Dark Network Alliance in the past 5 years, with a total amount of up to millions. Among them, Huading Investment is used as the main operating platform, and some high-level companies carry out money laundering, insider trading and other illegal activities through the instructions of the agency Black Ghost." He sat on the other side. He displayed the key data clippings in the U-disc through a projector, including fund transfer records, internal email transactions, and the relationship between several key numbers and real identities. Every time a picture is displayed, the whole scene is filled with surprise, and the media reporter's notebook slam sounds hardly stop. Chen Tiange finally couldn't sit still. He suddenly stood up, his voice low and majestic. "Zhang Min, Lin Haoran, do you know what you are saying? This unpredictable accusation is a serious remark to us and our investment in Huading. I ask that this drama beating is immediately terminated, otherwise I will pursue your legal responsibility." Zhang Min sneered and asked, "Mr. Chen, why are you so excited if these data are fake? Every record in our hands has detailed sources and third-party verification. If you don't believe it, you can ask the supervisor to intervene in the investigation on the spot." At this time, several representatives of the supervisory department sitting in the back row stood up, and one of the elderly men said in a deep voice, "I am the representative of the Financial Supervision Bureau. We have paid attention to Ms. Zhang's speech and information. Based on the evidence provided on site, we will immediately start the emergency investigation process. Mr. Chen Tianzhu, please cooperate." Chen Tiange's face was blue and there was a panic flashing in his eyes, but he was soon covered by it. He snorted coldly, sat back on his seat, and said coldly, "Okay, I want to see what kind of flowers you can play with." The atmosphere at the summit reached its peak, and media reporters rushed forward to try to visit Zhang Min and Lin Haoran. Zhang Min signaled Lin Haoran to retreat aside and said in a low voice, "You go down first and hand it over to me here. The supervisory department and media have intervened, and Chen Tianzhu can't escape." Lin Haoran slightly stepped back to the audience, but he was not relaxed. He knew that publishing information was just the first step. Even if there was a certificate, he might not be able to defeat him. However, things were moving faster than he thought. That night, the supervisory department launched an operation all night long, conquered several accounts under the name of Chen Tiange and his faction, and conducted a comprehensive review of the financial records invested by Huading. At the same time, the media exposed the data from the summit, and the discussion was silenced, and an unprecedented earthquake in the financial world was launched. A few days later, Chen Tiange and his core faction members were formally detained, with charges involving several felony crimes including money laundering, insider trading, illegal financing, etc. Ming Cheng, as the direct subordinate of Chen Tiange, was also involved. He was suspended and under investigation and finally lost his position in the company. Hwatting Investment conducted a major reshuffle within the company. With his performance at the summit and loyalty to the company, Jiang Min was promoted to the new CEO by the board of directors. Lin Haoran, this originally inconspicuous student, was promoted to the responsibility of the investment analysis department because of his key role in the incident, and became one of the youngest executives in the company's history. A few months later, in the conference room where Hwatting Investment invested, Lin Haoran was wearing a well-made custom suit, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the thriving scene of the entire financial center. There were a bunch of documents on his desk, all of which were plans for the company's new project, waiting for his review. "President Lin, the afternoon meeting is ready, and the customer has arrived." Assistant Xiao Zhou knocked in, his language full of respect. Lin Haoran smiled slightly and said, "Okay, I'll go there right away. By the way, bring the industry reform advocate. Today I plan to talk to my customers about this." Xiao Zhou was stunned for a moment, and immediately showed his admiring look. "President Lin, do you really plan to use some of the information in the U-Disc for industry reform? This is a big move." Lin Haoran turned around and his eyes were fixed. "Yes, I was holding a U-Wheeler at the time, just trying to change my fate, but now, I think I have the responsibility to do something. The financial industry can no longer be controlled by a few people, and the rules must be changed, otherwise there will be the next Chentianga." The small circumference point was headed and retreated. Lin Haoran looked at the skyline outside the window, feeling mixed emotions in his heart. From a bottom-level real life to the current financial genius, every step he took was full of hardship and danger, but it also made him understand the true meaning of power and responsibility. That night, Lin Haoran and Jiang Min had dinner at the restaurant on the top of the company. This was their first official gathering since the summit. Jiang Min was full of professional clothes and had a strong aura, but her eyes were gentle. "Lin Haoran, I didn't expect you to really get to this point." Jiang Min put on the wine glass and spoke with appreciation. "At first, I just thought you had some potential, but I didn't expect you to turn the whole industry upside down." Lin Haoran smiled and replied with a cup, "General Zhang, if you hadn't helped me, I would have been killed by Chentianga's people. Speaking of which, I have to thank you for not treating me as a chess piece at the beginning, but helped me sincerely." Jiang Min shook her head and said, "I help you because I saw Chentianga's true face, and because I believe that this industry needs people like you. What do you plan to do next?" Lin Haoran put down his wine glass and said in a calm voice, "I want to use some of the information in the U-Disc to promote industry supervision reform, establish more transparent market rules, and establish a fund to support those small and medium-sized enterprises that are under unfair competition. I know this path is not easy, but someone will always take the first step." After listening, Jiang Min was silent for a moment, then she showed a rare smile. "Okay, I have ambition. The company will support you, and I will do my best to help you do this." After dinner, Lin Haoran stood alone on the terrace of the company building, and the night wind blew over, bringing a sense of joy. He looked down at his phone. On the screen was a group of friends from college. Someone posted a message inside, "Haoran, I heard that you are a big shot now. When should you ask us to have a meal?" Lin Haoran replied with a smile, "When I finish this day, I'll ask you for a big meal when I go back." After posting the news, he raised his head and looked at the lights of the far away, and a long-lasting relaxation surged in his heart. From an ordinary college graduate to a rising star in the financial industry today, he used his hard work and courage to tear off the dark side of his career and change his fate. More importantly, he was not blinded by power and interests, but chose to use the resources in his hands to do something truly intentional. As the night was getting colder, Lin Haoran turned back to the office, ready to face tomorrow's challenge. His back looked particularly firm under the light, and the U-wheel that once made him die was no longer a threat, but became the starting point for him to change his industry pattern. From this moment on, Lin Haoran's story has become a legend in the financial world and has also shown a glimmer of hope for countless ordinary people.